Welcome back. We're joined by Ilan Berman, a man who has really contributed mightily to our understanding of so many of the international challenges that we're facing in his capacity as the vice president of a highly regarded organization in Washington, the American Foreign Policy Council. Among his many books is Iran's Strategic Penetration of Latin America, one of the many facets of the Iran problem with which he is conversant. In fact, so much so that he was called to testify earlier this week before the House Financial Services Committee about the deal. I call it the Obamabomb deal that President Obama has struck with Iran and a number of other nations. Ilan Berman, welcome back. It's always good to have you with us.
Oh, it's great to be back.
You have been busy, and helpfully so, for sure. Talk, first of all, if you would, briefly about the deal as you see it overall and what you said to the Financial Services Committee this week.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's necessary to understand the deal in context. The deal does have some positive aspects in the sense that a little bit of oversight of Iran's nuclear program is better than none at all. But if you start walking through the 150 some odd pages of the deal, what you actually see is an arrangement that's very deficient in a number of key respects, and it is, frankly, a tremendous benefit, not to us and not to our understanding of Iran's nuclear program, although we will have more, but to Iran and to Iran's political and economic futures, because the centerpiece of the deal isn't a rollback of Iran's nuclear program. It's a preservation of it and a massive flood of sanctions-liberated money that is going to really serve as a shot in the arm for the Iranian economy.
I did want to just note, Ilan, that even the upside that you see to it is obviously very restricted in terms of what will actually be allowed to see or to monitor and the extent to which that is of any bearing on the actual capabilities of this Iranian nuclear program, to say nothing of all the rest of the things that are seriously deficient, as you say, about this agreement. We're visiting with Ilan Berman, the vice president of the American Foreign Policy Council, about his assessment of the Obamabomb deal and his testimony about it before the House Financial Services Committee this week. Ilan, just to press a little further on this, among the things that I think you have described as being very deficient here is the various aspects of Iran's hegemonic ambitions that will be not only made much more readily achievable for them, thanks to the money, the windfall, by some estimates, $150 billion, maybe a bit less, but an enormous amount, and I want you to talk about that with us in context, but also the kind of opportunities they will have to get access to conventional arms and ballistic missiles and heavens knows what else. Give us a flavor of all that, if you would.
I think that's exactly right. And actually the money really, for me, sits at the center of all of the problems that are inherent in the deal. Because just to put this in context, the administration has talked publicly about liberating between $140 and $160 billion in funds, oil revenues that Iran has sold and oil that Iran has received revenue from, and that's been held in escrow in places like China and South Korea and other places. The part of the deal, part and parcel of the deal, is that we begin to repatriate that money to Iran and do so very quickly within the first 6 months or so that the deal is in effect. But those numbers are large, obviously, but they're not so helpful if they're not in context. So it's useful to point out that in 2014, the annual gross domestic product of Iran was $415 billion. So what you're essentially talking about is increasing Iran's annual budget by a quarter or more. It's actually a complete reversal of what we've seen over the last 3 years. Over the last 3 years, if you ask the Treasury Department, they'll tell you that Western sanctions levied by the U.S. and Europe and others have constricted Iran's economy by about a fifth. What you're looking at now is not only wiping that slate clean, but actually helping Iranian growth. This is a Marshall Plan for the Islamic Republic.
It is indeed, and this is a very important and apt analogy, it seems to me, because to the extent that that is what they're about, they're building a new world, in a way, in their part of the planet, if not more broadly, including, as you've observed in your book, Ilan Berman, the hemisphere south of our border, not least. This is a windfall that will be very, very ominous, I think, for us and our interests, as well as, of course, of Israel and so on. One of the impetuses behind all of this, quite clearly, was the ambition of some of these negotiating partners to get into Iran to make money. Talk, if you would, about what happens when the Germans send their trade delegation in, as they've done this week, or there's a Iran-EU, European Union business forum taking place in Vienna at the moment, in terms of compounding the windfall and giving these guys even more resources with which to make, well, war against us.
No, that's exactly right. And so what everyone who is skeptical of the deal has feared would happen is already beginning to happen, which is that unlike what the administration says, in which the president has said publicly many times that if Iran doesn't comply with the terms of the nuclear deal, the sanctions will just snap back. But the reality is that this idea of snapback is a fiction. It's a fiction because as soon as the nuclear deal is concluded, you see massive volumes of international trade re-entering the Islamic Republic in a way that's going to boost Iranian funds still further, in a way that's going to make it almost impossible to return to the place where we were before, where even though sanctions didn't hermetically seal off the Islamic Republic, they were stringent enough to cause some pain. What you're seeing now is exactly the opposite. Even if the United States rejects this deal after deliberation in Congress, even if we return to the sanctions regime, what we're going to find is that the international community has other ideas, and international business has re-entered Iran in a way that's going to make it much harder for us to isolate them.
Indeed, you may find them, in addition to international governmental and other figures being in place to advance the Iranian nuclear program, something provided for by this deal, or to protect the Iranian nuclear program, something endorsed by this deal. The capacity of these guys to turn all of these folks into human shields in the event that something does go bad for them is another consideration, as you know. Hey, speaking of the whole question of things turning, let me ask you, Ilan Berman, as an expert, among other things, on Turkey, to explain what has just happened as a result, we're told, of months of haggling with the Turks about the use of Incirlik airbase by American or NATO forces against the Islamic State, and I gather Turkish forces as well.
No, that's right. And so what you've actually seen, the big sea change in the fight against the Islamic State terrorist group is what's happened over the last 36 hours in Turkey, where you had a significant terrorist bombing in Turkey that has made it untenable for the government of Recep Tayyip Erdogan to actually have this hands-off approach that they've had for such a long time. And it's useful to understand why the Turks have been so uncooperative for so long, because from the start of the civil war in Syria, the Turkish government's official declaratory policy has been that not only must Bashar al-Assad in Syria go, but we're going to help him go, which has made them essentially complicit in the conflict and the chaos that's going on in Syria, and also in facilitating the flow of foreign fighters
to the Islamic State, among other bad actors, indeed. Ilan, this is a subject we're going to drill down more on in the future, if you'll indulge us. We're hard out of time at the moment, but thank you very much for the work you do at the American Foreign Policy Council. Congratulations on your recent testimony, and we look forward to working closely with you in opposing the Obamabomb deal. Next up, we will speak with Tennessee State Representative Judd Matheny about his state being the capital of American jihad. Straight ahead.